What's up guys, welcome back to my channel Anime Fiction. I am back with a new episode of What If Naruto Was Teleported to Another World Part 9. And if you did enjoy this video, like this video for the next part. And if you're new to my channel, hit that notification bell for more crossover fictions. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter 11. The birds sang a beautiful tune as the sun rose over the coastal city. The dew slowly dripped from the leaves of the tree as the little birds sang for their mother. It was a cool late spring morning when the sound of the animals in the tree outside her window slowly woke the girl up. From inside the women's dormitory, the scarlet-haired young woman slowly opened her eyes as the morning sunlight filtered through the trees, her curtains, and hid her face. The 13-year-old girl got up from her cot at the edge of her room as she yawned softly from waking up so early. Of her she wiped her eyes and got off the bed, making sure to avoid all the stray weapons and armor that were on the floor around her. Ezra went to the bathroom and began to smooth her long messy hair and take off her simple pajamas. As she stood naked in her bedroom, she exhaled and was enveloped in a brilliant light that covered her entire body. When the light dispersed a moment later, she wore his usual armor. A simple breastplate that covered her torso and a white skirt that covered her knees, followed by brown heels that gave her an extra inch of height. She walked over to the mirror in her personal bathroom as she looked at herself. She took a strand of her hair and began to braid it up her back. While doing this, it was much more difficult for her to do it alone than when she had Hilda Obachan to help her. Ezra then prevented her hair from curling when she was hit with a ghostly feeling of melancholy that she had been trying to overcome for the past few weeks. When she found the overturned horse-drawn carriage, all the armored young mage could do was cry. And when the news reached the rest of the dormitory's occupants, all they could do was mourn the loss of someone so important and essential to their lives. They had tried to get over the painful loss, but they had found it much more difficult than any of them could have imagined. Master Makarov had helped them through this, saying that she was a wonderful woman who treated the girls of Fairy Tail like her own daughters. That she was a woman who would be loved and remembered for the rest of her days in Fairy Tail. And that she would never truly leave until they remembered the love and kindness she had given them over the years. But Ezra still found it difficult, feeling so lost and hurt by the tragedy. How could someone so important to her life, that she was talking to last night about what she would be like when she grew up, be gone in just one day? It was heartbreaking. Ezra was still very sorry about this even now. But she was able to ease some of the pain by talking to someone who would listen. Surprisingly, that someone was Mira Jane. After a week had passed and Ezra was still a little down, some of the other guild members were worried about her. She didn't even know that she was causing this concern among his friends. If she really knew, she would have tried to suppress some of the pain and hide it with a smile. But before she could react, Mira Jane approached her. She slapped her across the face, and then she stood there with her hands on her hips. Everyone in the guild was shocked and horrified. Everyone, even the master, was already hiding as the redhead turned her face in surprise to look at the demon girl. And even though they didn't actually say anything there, she immediately understood what Mira Jane was trying to convey to her. That he couldn't sit there regretting what had happened and that she had to start living her life the way Oba-chan wanted to. And Elsa nodded and put a small smile on her face to show that she understood. Which was returned by an enthusiastic Mira. Of course, to keep up appearances, they had to fight and destroy half the guild. Hey, you can't let people think they can slap you in the face and you wouldn't react by slapping them back. Afterwards, while the rest of the guild was putting things together, the girls had a quick chat on the subject. In which Mira Jane said the exact same words to Ezra that she had said to her just weeks before their first fight. Ezra finished braiding her braid as she looked in the mirror and smiled to herself. He had to start cheering up again. She wasn't supposed to be the type to have regrets for the rest of his life. She had to get up and start over where she left off. If that meant accepting requests, eating cake, and beating up Gray and Natsu, then so be it. The redhead came out of the bathroom and looked at the tree in front of her window. She watched in silence as the birds gathering in the tree nest flapped their wings. They wanted and entered the bright and blue skies. She smiled when she decided that she had to do the same. Deep in the eastern forest, beyond Magnolia, a tall woman with pink hair in a bun was cleaning the area in front of a large tree with her broom. As she continued to tidy up the courtyard in front of her house, Fairy Tail's medical advisor looked up at the bright cloudy morning sky of the new day. This was one of the reasons he loved the seclusion of the forest most in this world. There was no hustle and bustle of the city, so she didn't have to worry about people disturbing her. The only concern she really had whether she had fueled the deer or not today. That. And when Makarov's more idiots are injured for the wound to fight for any reason more than fighting. She supposed that was one of the reasons she was still there. After all the years in Fairy Tail being taken in when she first came into this world, she must have felt compelled to help people in need. Whenever Makarov or Rob got hurt fighting, she was the one with the experience to heal them. It must have been a feeling that she felt deep inside when she discovered that they had resorted to fighting to solve their problems. Especially after what happened to Hashirama-san and his group. She knew what it was like to arrive in a world so similar to his own, yet so different in so many ways. Having to adapt to the styles and culture of a world that struggled to accept you. She had to wonder how many years it had been since someone had last called her by her real name. She had hoped for the best for the mighty ninja and his followers in their quest to find their way home. Knowing that even if she was stuck there, didn't mean they should be too, so she was shocked when the news of Tonwa's tragedy reached the whole country. This was what the fighting had led to. Because of an escape label and the need to prove themselves, hundreds of people suffered and died. And not only innocent civilians, but also Hashirama, Yukiha and all the others, who will never be heard from again. She hates fighting. She really hated him. All it did was lead to more pain. After idiot Makarov was recognized as the next guild master, she knew there was even more pain ahead. And she knew she could help the next generation get back on their feet. So is it now, despite all her complaining and chattering about humans and Hearn to fix everything with violence. She knew she was a human who couldn't make a person suffer if it was in her power to help them. Which led to the next pain in the ass of hers. Poor Lyuzuka returned to her hollow treehouse, setting down her broom by the steps. She went up the stairs and opened the door on her way back to her house. The old doctor walked over to her workstation as she began breaking down herbs and turning them into her potions. While fiddling with a vial filled with a synthetic magic potion used to cure certain ailments, he caught a reflection of his current patient himself. Lying on the only bed occupying the large room was a blond boy with mustache-like patches running down his cheeks. The boy was resting peacefully under the covers as the sunlight bathed the bed. Despite the blonde's rested face, under the covers his body was still covered in fresh bandages and healing medicines to speed up the process. The old doctor could only say that this was more trouble than it was worth. Nay, poor Lyuzuka. Why did we have to come here again? The leader of the group of three looked behind her at the whimpering dwarf and the disgruntled guild ace. Just got back from the guild master meeting and wanted to have a drink. Stop complaining, you idiot. It's because of what you told me after the meeting that makes it so urgent. Pristine environment. Guildarts just randomly wandered around and destroyed everything that got in his way with Crash. The taller member of the three looked at the shorter member. Hey old man, what exactly did you tell him that he has panties on it? Poor Lyuzuka looked over her shoulder at the younger wizard as the two men charged into the kitchen and he shivered with fear. I mean, what did you say that got Prolyasika-san so worried? Makarov rubbed his chin as he tried to think of what had prompted her to make this sudden journey to his treehouse. And when I told her she should look for someone that the board had released a report on, she said it was very important. What was the report about? Ah, it was something stupid about a child they were looking for. Makarov yawned as they approached the house made out of the hollow tree. Apparently, a young man had challenged and defeated a team from the damned division. And now the council has ordered all guild masters to be on the lookout for this child. Naturally, that man, Jose, had decided that only the one hash guild should report this case and promised he would deliver the boy, dead or alive. Wow. Must he have some serious problems? Makarov chuckled and nodded as Guildarts whistled in surprise. Dude, a kid defeated a team of damnation. That's awesome. I'd love to meet the little bastard who could do something like that to those assholes. The guild ace laughed aloud. For he was also accompanied by Makarov's laughter. Yes. I'd like to share a drink with him. Hey, maybe Oba-chan is taking you to his house to show you where he's already caught him. Both men laughed until their sides ached as they reached the open door of the medical advisor. Home. Ahahaha, that would be the day. The two men wiped away some tears that had pooled in their eyes as they walked. They immediately gasped when they saw a bandaged body propped up on the bed in front of them. Several tense moments passed where the only sound that could be heard were the crickets outside scratching his legs. Ah, she did it. She killed someone. Hide me. Hide me. Guildrats ran out and jumped down the stairs because he knew the woman didn't care about all the times he trashed her house just to get inside. Poor Lyuzuka-chan. What did you do? Did he eat your apples or something? Oh my god, you broke. Run. Run away from the madwoman. Shut up, idiots, and listen. The men broke their momentary breakdown as they hugged and snuggled at her rage. Her veins throbbed as she took a soothing breath and moved closer to the boy's wounded form. Makarov, you said the person you were looking for was a blonde guy with a mustache and a prosthetic arm, right? The head shirt stopped joking and looked at the woman, surprised at the turn the conversation was taking. As the two men approached the bed, poor Lyuzuka gently pulled the bright blonde hair over the young man's head. Then he pulled his sheets back and revealed the fully formed metal arm that was attached to the left side of the child's torso. And to a more careful exam, you could clearly see the 3 black lines on each cheese of him. This is him, okay? Makarov kept a stern expression as he looked at his old friend and nodded. Gildarts stood there silent and watched the boy covered head to toe in new bandages. His chest barely moved as the young man took very small breaths. The stress and pain on the boy's face was still evident as there appeared to be a few beads of sweat accumulating on his forehead. What's wrong with him? Fariy knelt down and dipped a small towel in her hand as she used it to wipe the boy's face. He had 7 broken ribs and 5 cracked ones, torn muscle fibers all over the chest. Broken bones in his arms and legs that would make anyone fall over and cry in pain. He has torn ligaments and his ankles were sprained enough that his muscles were torn. The skin and bone structure of his fists were so broken that a splint ran down his entire forearm. Additionally, he had internal bleeding and severe trauma to her head, limbs, lungs, and sternum. He also had multiple burns all over his body, most likely induced by some magical means. So in short, it's pretty messed up. Makarov looked at the boy because he couldn't help but feel sorry for the boy. No one this young man should experience has to be hurt so badly. Where did you find him? He was in the forest near Yarrow after the attack of that dark guild. The older men seemed surprised by her theory of her while the girl seemed to calm down by touching the cold pack in her hand. I didn't even know there was an attack going on as I was gathering some medicinal herbs to make other potions. When I was about to finish, I just found this guy attached to a log floating down the river. He was lucky I was there to give him immediate first aid, or, he shook his head to show how lucky the guy was for her to be there when she was. I had to be careful transporting his body here, otherwise he could have been in critical condition. So you're saying he was part of that grimoire guild and was involved in the explosion? Perhaps. But I can't be sure until he really wakes up and I can ask him. How long has he been sleeping? A few days ago. I try to wake him up but he doesn't respond. Just a moan every few hours and a nervous sweat like that. He wiped the sweat-covered rag as the 2 men stood there, contemplating the next right course of action. So, old man, will you report it to the council? Tell them you have the boyfriend they are so eager to meet? Makarov's head was cocked to one side as he considered the options available. Well, I guess we should wait until we can interrogate him ourselves. See if he's really a threat or if the board just got bad information. I won't think a kid like this has done something so bad until I hear him say it from his own lips. Until then, we should keep him here, away from everyone else. Gildarts nodded as he agreed with his master's decision regarding the boy's condition. There's something else you should know. Makarov looked at the pink-haired woman as she bent over the boy's head. He placed a hand on her face and pushed her lids away with her thumbs. Makarov moved to his side and looked into the boy's eyes. He remained silent and calm, revealing the slight surprise in his eyes when he saw the boy's color, blue and brown. Same as the girl in the armor you brought in last year. So she might have something to do with all of this after all. Armor girl? Do you mean Ezra? What does Ezra have to do with all this? It's a long story. I'll tell you later, Gildarts. The little saintly wizard looked at Fariy. What do you think we should do? I'll keep him here until he wakes up. When he does, I'll see if I can find out anything about what he was doing. If he was in that guild, I'll try to sedate him so you can turn him into the knights. It may be dangerous, I'm not sorry. It is my duty to make sure he gets over these wounds and wakes up. And I can't do that if he's in a cell. Makarov smiled at her as she remained dead serious with her promise. And behind them, Gildarts was completely lost. It was about a month ago. By then, most of the boy's wounds had healed and faded. No doubt his muscles would still ache from all the exhaustion and physical treatment, which is why he was still unconscious now. And there would still be a new scar or 2 to add to the boy's collection on his body. But nothing that could affect it in the long run. But he had to say it was getting boring to hide this guy from everyone else. Makarov made it easier by asking children to be more careful about the requests they make. But he didn't have much faith that those brats wouldn't hurt themselves doing something stupid. He just wasn't so lucky. The old woman sighed as she continued to work with the chemicals in front of her. Either way, she'd be there to make sure the boy stayed calm when he woke up. And if he really was part of that dark guild, then he would have to make sure he didn't enter the city. It doesn't matter the price. Unseen by the woman as she continued to prepare new remedies and medicines, there was a stir in the sheets behind her. And a flicker of blue and brown light behind her slowly opening eyes. Ezra looked eagerly at the bulletin board as she stamped her foot on the wooden floor. About her she had her arms crossed because she couldn't decide which of the horrible jobs in front of her was acceptable. In general, she was not too demanding for the type of work he accepted, but the effort did not seem to be really valid. You find some strange plants for a certain experiment. Destroy a rock that was in the path of a stream. They wanted servants, they preferred strong women. She didn't know why, but she felt she wasn't going to be accepted for that last job. And that annoyed her a little. The only job on the entire board he would actually take was a worker at Parker Sands corporate headquarters. She didn't really require her to use her magic or anything, just to do some heavy lifting. But since it wasn't a job that really required the help of a wizard, it didn't pay very well. Sure, the man himself was kind enough, despite the rather rough look of him. The first time he took the job was when she told her that Naruto was still alive and had arrived on the mainland. And since then, she'd come every few months to see her and help with her job. But today he didn't feel like traveling to Harjin, so she let out an annoyed sigh and turned away. "What's wrong, Ezra? Nothing nice to have?" Ezra looked up to see her former master looking at her with a raised eyebrow. "No, I don't think I'll apply today. I might stay here and have a day off." Her master raised his cup and clapped his hands as he downed a quarter of the drink in moments. Ezra giggled as she started walking to the table with half of the day's snack, hoping to finish it sooner to grab another piece. The armored girl looked at the empty plate. She stood there in silence as the other wizards around him seemed to enjoy themselves, not knowing that another piece of her favorite strawberry shortcake had just been taken away. Why? Why did everyone have to have her cake? Was it fun? Did you want a piece? She looked at the only other people at his table. Natsu and Gray looked at each other and promised to punish each other for no reason. "Oh, it's time for revenge. Oh boy, can I have a word please?" The two boys stopped arguing and looked at the older girl. "Hey. What's going on, Ezra? In the end she comes to challenge me, right? Stupid coal brain. Evidently he's come to take a beating. Whatever you say. But let's go outside, shall we?" The two boys leapt to their feet and followed the red-haired girl as she quietly exited. From her seat at the other table, Mira Jane laughed coyly as she licked her fingers off the icing. In front of her, her younger brothers were shaking their heads as they tried to argue with the other sorceress. But outside the guild building, a bright light appeared for an instant before fading again. And in their place were the silhouettes of 5 people. Well, 2 women, 2 men and a cat with wings. Poor Lyuzica finished her chemical concoction as she poured it into another flask to settle. In fact, she wore a faint, almost tiny smile as she got lost in the creation of the new elixirs. Then she noticed that a small gust of wind was pushing cold air into the enclosure. Looking over her shoulder, he saw that her bedroom door was slightly ajar. She sighed as he got up and walked over to the door to close it so she could. Wait. Open. When she did, she turned quickly to see that the bed was empty and the sheets pulled back lazily. She looked around the entire room as she tried to find the boy who had woken up at her house out of sight of her. She ran to his workstation and took a potion for a fast-acting sedative. She slowly left the house and carefully descended the steps, trying not to make any sudden movements or noises. She had to find the boy before he came to town and caused trouble. If she found out that Fairy Tail was inadvertently keeping him here, he knows what he would have done to get revenge. When she got to the bottom of the stairs, he grabbed the broom he was using earlier and used it as an improvised weapon. Looking around, trying to find the young blonde. The woman heard a strange noise coming from her left side. She turned to see only trees and forest. Poor Lyuzica could hear the strange noise as a kind of groan of pain or exhaustion. She walked towards the noise, still on her guard to make sure she wasn't taken by surprise. The noise continued to echo in his ears and was soon followed by a gush of what sounded like water. Suddenly he heard the noise clearer than before and was able to figure out where it was happening. She stood to the side of his house as he clambered along the boat, trying to remain as inconspicuous as possible until the last moment. He jumped out of hiding to see what was going on. "I was there. Your blonde patient from the last month. Standing there with bandages on my arm and chest. With his gray pants pulled down to his thighs as he urinated in his treehouse." "Ah. So much better," the boy whimpered as he continued to relieve himself on the stump of the tree he was standing on. He finished and cleaned up when he realized that there was a feeling of being watched next to him. He turned his head to see a wrinkled old woman standing with her jaw dropped and a broom in her hand. She had pink hair gathered in a bun held up by a crescent pin and was dressed in a long red cloak. "Hi. Don't say greetings to me brattolo. And stop pissing in my house right now." She began hitting his head with the top of the broom as he grunted and moaned in pain. "Ouch. Ouch. Enough, lady. What the hell is your problem? Ouch." She tried to block her blows and shoot him a menacing glare only to realize she was looking into the face of a fire-breathing demon. In mad rage, he screamed and tried to run away from her as she chased him around the tree, swinging her broom with the promise of revenge. Don't think you will follow me so easily. Ah, monster, monster, someone get it. XXXXXXXXX. What? I've been here for a month. What happened? The blonde boy yelled at the old woman sitting on a stool in front of him. Shut up. God, you're a loud brat. The mustachioed boy shivered as he continued to be examined by the tree-dwelling medical advisor. She checked his pupil dilation and muscle reflex, as well as his vital signs. She took off her stethoscope and told him to put down her new black top. You look fine. No, thanks to you for hitting me with that broom. Don't pee in my house next time, you ignorant little idiot. The boy leapt to his feet and hid under the covers, his eyes being the only visible feature still open for viewing. She sighed and went back to mixing new items to treat him. All of your vital signs are checked and there appears to be no change in your brain function. Naruto watched as he wrapped his arm around his joint, wincing as a slight pain shot through his muscles. Do I still feel sore? That's because your body was badly injured. It took a long time for your muscles and bones to reorganize and adjust properly, even with my help. Don't worry though, just give him some time and drop any dangerous feat of stupidity and you should be right as the rain. Naruto looked around the room as he sat cross-legged on the bed. Where are we anyway? And who are you, Ba-chan? Naruto panicked and dodged a vile spray of strange liquid that collided and ate the wood behind his head. Don't you dare call me you little brat. My name is Fariy and that's all you have to call me, okay? Yes ma'am. Fariy nodded at Naruto's greeting as she settled herself and sat back on his stool. You were in my house in the eastern forest. I found you floating down the river near Yarrow covered in wounds and brought you here. I've been taking care of you ever since to make sure you don't get worse. Okay, nothing goes here. What exactly were you doing there? Naruto mumbled a bit as he tried to think about the events that had brought him to this place. Well, I was on my way to Magnolia when I got to the ruined city. He growled angrily as he gritted his teeth and his hands. I saw all those dead and I couldn't control myself. He remembered the overwhelming numbers of wizards and the immeasurable fear and power that old bastard exuded. They were too strong. She saw the raw anger and vulnerability evident in his mismatched eyes as he seemed to seethe with rage at his inability to defeat the immensely powerful Dark Guild. She could clearly see in his eyes that the reaction he was having was not fake or exaggerated, and she might say, this guy wasn't actually in that guild. So can I ask you another question? Naruto looked at her with an innocent look in her eyes as she turned and faced him. Before the attack on Yarrow, there was a small town called Acacia which was destroyed by a squad from the Damnation Guild. It was reported that a boy resembling you was seen at the scene engaging in a fight. Yes. Those guys were going to kill a lot of innocent people, so I got in their way. I'm not in that fucking guild if that's what you're asking. He leaned against the smooth wood behind him as he felt surprisingly tired from just that conversation. So you're not some mysterious creature helping bad guys get in the way. You're just a meddling kid who gets into trouble because he can't help himself. More or less, in fact, he laughed like a normal child as he looked at the prosthetic arm on his body. That's something Bob-san and Rob Ji-chan told me when I got this thing. The old woman dropped the vial into her hand as she was surprised by her casual reminiscence of hers. She reached out and grabbed him by her shoulders as she looked into his eyes. Did you say Rob? Do you know Rob? Where? Is he still alive? She was shaking him fast enough that his face blurred as only the separate syllables reached his ears. Yes, I was in the mountains near Pegasus with Bob-san. He gave me this prosthesis after I hurt myself and I took refuge. I haven't seen him since. He stopped shaking him as her eyes bounced in her sockets and it was hard for her to see clearly. Poor Lyuzuka sighed because she couldn't believe that old son of a bitch hadn't told them that he was back. She moaned and stamped her feet angrily. Naruto was actually trying to back off as he was getting more and more scared of the old woman. Do you know Rob Ji-chan Oba-ch? Look. Poor Lyuzuka-san. He had to make sure he didn't make her any more angry than he already had. Yes, we were friends together. He and I were part of the same group. She looked down at a photo on a stand next to her workstation. She picked it up and had good memories playing it as he fiddled with his side. She turned and handed it to the boy who was watching her expectantly. He took the photo and examined it carefully. In the corner was a writing of X736, representing that this was taken a long time ago. He looked at all the people in the picture who were together like one big happy family. A man in a leather jacket giving a thumbs up at the camera was the closest person in the picture. And behind him, a handsome man in a business suit with silky black hair and a sultry smile. A shorter man with spiky blonde hair and a very surly expression on his face. Beside him was a large tower of a man and a younger man with a single open eye and a strange rectangular jaw. And finally a standing woman of impeccable posture with long pink hair that fell down her back. And behind him, the fairy tale building. Wow. You've gotten really old, huh? Thwack, ouch. Sorry. He stroked the bump on his head as he looked back at the photograph. Then wait? Where is Ji-chan? She growled at him before pointing at the big man with his familiar shape and hair. Naruto's jaw dropped and he laughed as hard as he could. He tried to calm down before falling onto the bed and clutching his hips in the pain of pleasure. Prolyasika shook her head and returned to her stool at work as she picked up the pieces of broken glass. Ha ha ha, that's great. I know another one of you guys. Prolyasika looked at him questioningly. What do you mean? Another one of you who was in the last generation of fairy tale. She smiled as broadly as possible as she looked at her in admiration. You were all amazing. I want to join that guild more and more every time I meet one of you. Rob Ji-chan taught me all about magic and fighting. Bob San started a whole new guild all weird like fuck, is famous all over the world. And you saved my life. Thank you. Thank you so much. Prolyasika looked at him and his broad smile before feeling a hint of nostalgia evident in his shit-eating grin and exultant demeanor. She shook her head quickly as she tried to shake off the slight pleasure of being praised for her skill from her mind. Well, that's nice. You seem really excited to meet some old fools from fairy tale, don't you? Yes. I wanted to join the guild since Rob Ji-chan always told me stories about it. He looked down at his feet as he smiled sadly at the few good times they'd had in that hell. Where there was a light they could fight for right outside the bars. And he wanted to get there with the girl who had given him that first bright light. But every time he got closer, someone or something pushed him further back. He didn't even know if the redhead was in the guild. And much less alive. It was just wishful thinking, hoping that the target he'd wanted since he was a kid might still be alive. But the way he'd seen the world up until now hadn't raised his hopes for him, and had only made it more difficult for him to see that target. I really wanted to be there with Ezra, but, I guess in the end we can't have everything we want. Oh, so you know that little redhead? I was wondering if she was like that. I guess I was right. Naruto heard what she said and looked at the cloaked woman's back with narrowed eyes. What do you mean, Oba-chan? He was about to turn and hit him over the head for his continued insolence when he saw that there was a spark of confusion and hope in his eyes. She turned to keep intact the air of indifference that surrounded her. I mean, you have the same eye color as the Urza girl Makarov brought me last year. One eye was missing, so I decided to fix it. By the way, you said you wanted to join Fairy Tale, right? She gestured over her shoulder to the closed door of her house. If you follow the dirt road, it will lead you directly to the entrance to Magnolia. And across town is the guild you've always wanted to see. Not lucky? She sat waiting for a response from the boy, like a strange howl or the thud of his body falling into a swoon. But he didn't receive any sound or knock as expected. In fact, it was completely silent except for the sound of the afternoon winds blowing through the leaves. She spun on the stool, but a flash of black and yellow blinded her. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Oba-chan. Thank you so much. Ha. Ha 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 ha. He continued the crunching hug as the woman began to turn purple and flail her arms as she gasped for air. She dropped him to the floor and literally started jumping off the walls like an excited child should. Completely ignoring the pain in the muscles from active action. I did it. I did it. Woohoo. He leapt off the bed with such force that the springs creaked under his feet. He lined up for the door before feeling the woman grab him by the back of his shirt in an attempt to pull him back. Unfortunately, with her being a woman with no magical abilities and the boy being a superpowered tank of stamina with a metal arm and an entire month of pent-up energy, he was pushed through the door and dragged along the ground until he realized he was loading. A little more weight. Eh? Oba-chan. What's wrong? The gasping, dirt-covered old woman began to crush her head in her hands as her arms flailed in an attempt to escape. What's wrong with you? How could you run away like that when I didn't even give you a check diagnosis? But I'm right here. I'm so close. Oba-chan, let go. She picked him up and placed him under her arm as she walked back to her treehouse. Look, I'll make you something to eat before you go. But I'm not hungry, an animal growl rang in her ears as Naruto watched her stomach quiver. Hee. Well, I think I can eat before I go. Prolyasika shook her head angrily at the boy's careless care for her condition. And how she was forced to take care of it. Stupid human brats. The blue sky was tinged with the colors of diffused red and dazzling orange. The clouds had expanded and covered the entire earth in a beautiful blend of blue and white. Even though it was almost night when people were going home and getting ready for the next day, there were still many people walking around and going about their business. They all had smiles on their faces and the streets were clear for the passage of dozens of people and there was still enough space to be dazzled by the atmosphere. This city seemed much bigger than Viola. And there were far more people who used magic as an everyday tool than anyone else in Harjin. The young man in long gray trousers, black shoes, and short-sleeved black shirt was amazed that this was the city he had heard was the guild's base. Random people, strangers, would greet him and tell him to have a nice day. He was overwhelmed by this new feeling of familiarity and couldn't help but wave excitedly. Naruto felt a wave of anxiety go through his body and butterflies fly into his belly. Well, it doesn't actually fly. More like bouncing at sonic speeds as they hit his stomach like a train. He laughed constantly as he got closer and closer to the center of the big city. He followed the glistening river as it passed through the center of town as it approached a tall man who was closing up shop. "Excuse me, sir?" The older gentleman looked over his shoulder as if a voice had caught his attention. The boy in question was navel length, with gorgeous blonde hair and large eyes that glittered in cerulean blue and vibrant brown. He was dressed rather loosely, but had some sort of wrap around his left arm as the metal reached up to the end of his sleeve. But the most amazing thing about him at the time was that those strange marks on his face were wrinkled with muscles ripped away from the happy smile he was flashing at the moment. "Can you tell me where I can find Fairy Tail Guild?" The older man smiled and pointed to the waterbed behind the boy. "If you follow the water, you will find yourself at the point where the city begins to divide into the northern and southern regions. In the northern part of the city, you will see the guild at the outer edge of the city. Not to be missed." Naruto followed the man's direction and nodded in thanks. He walked the streets as he could not see beyond the large buildings that surrounded him. Naruto shrugged as he decided on the quickest approach to find his target. He approached an ally and sent some of his magic into the soles of their feet. He jumped up and began bouncing off the walls of the surrounding buildings as he approached the rooftops, recalling his tree jumping practices with Rob. He landed on one of them and looked out at the huge city in front of him. The city lit up in the dim light from the stage. The entire city was bathed in a red and orange glow. The huge lake behind the shore was almost completely still, reflecting the sky so well that it seemed as if two suns were setting against each other. Naruto was speechless as his breath caught in the dazzling sight in front of him. Naruto sat on the edge of the building, looking at the entire landscape in front of him. Directly in front of him, the enormous cathedral surpassed every detail in grandeur, towering far above all the surrounding shops and houses. The merging rivers were all tinted red by the color of the sky as they flowed into the lake, and at the edge of town, on the edge before it reached the coast, was a big orange building. It had a large rounded dome on top. 3 floors down it until you reach the ground of the city. And from here too he could see the 3 flags hanging from the top floor. With the insignia of a creature with wings and a long, pointed tail that sprouts from her back. There it is, Fairy Tail. Naruto leaned back on his left arm and extended his right hand. The sun's rays were blocked by her hand as she looked at the sharper image of Magnolia. He smirked as he returned his hand to his lap. He looked at his hand as he examined how it had changed over the years. He could remember what his hand was like when he was first born, trapped in that tower. It was much smaller and much more fragile than now. Now that he thought about it, his whole body had changed a lot since then. He thought how young and simple they were then. Even in that awful cell, he and all of his friends still tried to work together and see the best in the world. Talking to each other about what they would do once they were finally free of that seat as Rob Ji-chan chuckled from his seat by the wall. He felt a hint of homesickness and the regret of not being able to be there with all his friends. Memories of that last day unfolded before her eyes as if they were happening all over again. Her pain and her tears. Pain and loneliness. All. And I didn't even know where they were. But at least Erza was here. Poor Lyuzuka Bon told him that she joined the guild over a year ago. Around the time they'd escaped from the tower. So she must have been happy with what she was doing now. Taking orders. Make friends. Explore the world. And looking for it. Parents. And just then, an icy weight fell into her stomach so fast that she almost felt like throwing up. She put her hands to her sides and gripped the side of the building as she tried to steady herself. Like an anchor in this world he couldn't escape. This was the moment he had dreaded for the last year. Where she had to tell her oldest friend the truth about her family. When they were in the cell, she talked to him and only him about this situation. She didn't talk about it often. And each time was short and just passed as a conversation. But when she mentioned it, his eyes shone with a light that could have shone through the entire tower. A hope he could safely say he'd never experienced in his life. In that dark hell, that was the light in the tunnel that he kept trying to walk through. The motivation of him to continue to stand and fight for his freedom. That was his hope. That was her light, and he was going to crush her like an apple. All she wanted to do was join this guild and experience what she was like. To have a purpose and a family to call your own. And when he was there, he would meet the girl who had given him this dream to fight for. And should she have told him that her family, her real family, was gone? She felt sick just thinking about it. What would I do? Would you go there and just ignore the topic, hoping it never came up? Or would she lie to him and tell him to keep looking, keeping the truth from him so he could keep waiting for an opportunity? What did they say? Was ignorance bliss? She looked down at her lap as she approached a panic attack. Did he have the right to hide it? When she helped him achieve and fight for a dream, he lied to her and told her to keep going on an endless path. It would hurt him to lie to his face like that. But she knew he would hurt even more to see her devastation in his eyes if she told him the truth. Crack asterisk. Naruto snapped out of his downward spiral of regret as he looked to his left. With all the turmoil in his head, he had started to grip the ceiling more tightly for support. And as a result, he dug his fingers into the concrete like hot butter and absent-mindedly pulled a chunk out. He squeezed and reduced the piece to pebbles and dust. As he watched the rock particles blow from his hand into the wind, he looked at the part of him that had changed the most during his time in this world. What else had changed? But it was still the anchor of what it really was. You're not even a full human anymore, are you? Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he searched for the clear, booming voice in his ears. After a moment of searching, he realized where he'd heard this voice and tone before. That bastard from Hades. The son of a bitch, that was the only reason he was like this now echoed in his head. His sneering words and violent jabs at his humanity and control echoed in his mind. You can fight that urge for as long as you like. Get away from it. Ignore him. Imagine it never existed in the first place. But one day, when the people you've been trying to help are dead at your feet and you're soaked in their blood, you'll break. And you will kill everyone around you. Be friends or enemies. Most likely with that same hand. Naruto grinned as he remembered the man trying to question his morals and dreams of him. Testing him by telling him that he would turn into a demon, something worse than even the creature he had summoned to attack him. And that he wouldn't even be able to control himself from taking the lives of everyone around him. It was just a matter of time. Naruto gritted his teeth as his eyes flashed with deeply seated hatred and anger. This made him angry. It pissed him off an incredible amount. That guy. That monster was lecturing him about his uncontrollable attitude and use of power, while he was in a field of fire and blood that the man in question had caused. I couldn't control it. He didn't understand his will and need to keep fighting. He knew Hades was wrong. I just knew it. Naruto looked down at his clenched armored hand and saw several small scratches weaving between his knuckles. His eyes widened before becoming heavy and cloudy with sadness. Except it wasn't. As much as he wanted Hades to be wrong, he was right. Naruto couldn't control himself as he lost his temper and was fueled by anger and hatred. The end of that fight was more than enough evidence to back up that claim. That unbridled anger towards a monster like this man had clouded his mind. Like what she had happened to him when he was under Kurama's influence, only it was his feelings about him that made him change. His thoughts and actions were only about killing the old man in the most painful and humiliating way. Even though she couldn't feel anything in her left hand, she could still feel the sensation of breaking that man's face and body with her bare hands, covering him in blood and saliva. Hearing the crunch of her bones, the splattering of blood and the screams of pain and agony still ringing in her ears. All of this was still fresh in her mind, and she didn't even know if the man was still alive. He won't be able to control himself if he loses it again. So would you take the risk? Risking Ezra and everything she had come to love just so she could have a few moments of happiness? Or could I just run? If he left, Ezra would never know what happened to her parents. She would still search, having a lasting hope filling his heart as her searched for his old family with the people he had come to recognize as his new family. He could do what Kazuya and Erika had done with their lives. Travel across the country and help those in real need. He wanted to teach those damnation kids the lesson he promised them. And he knew that Grimoire heart wasn't dead yet. He might die, but it might be for a worthy cause. In the glow of the setting sun, Naruto turned and looked at the entrance to the city above the houses. And then back to Fairy Tail. A possible future home or the life of solitude that he tried to leave. Hurt her comrade or fight those who lived to hurt. The options were there for him to make. I just had to choose. Natsu. Gray. Where are you? Come now. I have to apologize. After their little encounter, she beat them up. She went back to the guild to catch her breath. When she returned, Mirajane came out and told the whole guild to listen that she took it. Normally, Ezra would have gotten angry and argued with someone who did this to her. But since she was Mira, and she pissed her off for some reason, they decided to remove her physical option. The civilians moved away as Naruto rounded a corner and followed the vehicle with all his might. He looked surprised as he rounded the corner. Even a woman in a strange bunny suit was chasing the runaway carriage. He was inches away from grabbing the metal bar of the carriage as he tried with all his might to save the girl inside. "Hey!" Naruto yelled after her. "You should go. I can do it by myself." "So. I won't let a little girl get hurt." The girl yelled over her shoulder because she couldn't see the boy directly behind her. "I have to help her as best I can." Naruto raised an eyebrow in surprise at his noble effort as he smiled a little at her attempt to help. "Okay, here. Let me help you." He ran forward and reached out to help pull her into the carriage. In this case, the first thing she could grab to lift her was her round, firm bottom in her leggings. Getting a gasp of surprise from the blonde woman in front of him. "Hey! What are you doing, little perv? Get your hands off me, huh?" She felt relieved when the boy pushed her butt up. She squealed as the boy behind her lifted her over his head and jumped back. Wait. Let's think about this, Aya." Naruto tossed the bunny onto the carriage and heard a pained grunt as he touched the roof. Naruto followed her and grabbed the bar she was reaching for earlier. She got up and jumped into the back of the carriage when she could see a terrified silhouette in the parted curtain. "Hey! Are you okay?" He received a barely audible positive response as he looked up to see the rabbit land in front of the carriage. She was making annoying straining sounds as she tried to grip the lashes around the horse's mouth. "And you? Were you lucky?" The bunny heard the sound of the little pervert that he was helping her in this endeavor because she couldn't stop the horses. "No, let's fast. I can't get him out of here." Naruto cackled as he tried to think of a way to help the woman with her work. She looked down at the fast-moving ground below him and a silly thought occurred to him. "Wait." Naruto leapt to his feet and used his feet as brakes to stop the carriage from accelerating. Both girls squealed as the vehicle suddenly slowed as the boy used his magic to strengthen his feet and dig into the concrete beneath him. She gritted her teeth to keep from her mouth the growing noises of disgust and pain. The bunny took the opportunity to reach into the mouths of the struggling horses and tug on the leashes. The animals escaped as the older woman fell backwards. "I did it." Naruto gasped and hopped back onto the back of the carriage, hissing in pain from his feet bleeding through his black shoes. He rubbed his feet as the carriage pulled out of the city limits and headed up the rocky road. The three blondes in the carriage took a deep breath as their adrenaline subsided. And then, the three of them started laughing with joy at what they had done. "Bye-bye. Oni-chan. Are you okay?" The soft, shy voice from inside the carriage asked the woman gasping in front of the vehicle. He got a chuckle in return as the woman regained her full strength. Naruto smiled as he leapt off the perch and limped slowly towards the front of the wagon. "Of course I'm fine. I'm a wizard after all." She smiled and casually leaned back, remembering that she had some help. "Hey, are you okay, Perv-kun?" She heard footsteps approaching him. "My name is not Perv-kun, understand?" He walked over to the side of the carriage and got a good look at the woman he had helped to stop the carriage. She was younger than she thought, only a few years older than him. She had very long blonde hair with a pair of white bunny ears on top. She had very large breasts and a tiny waist which suited the cosplay she was wearing very well. And in her hand was the fairy tale symbol in pink. Naruto's eyes widened as he wanted to ask her a question. "Ah, Sul serious?" She started and girare la cabeza para mirarlo. Thumb everyday feetsmasum stormaliciemilium fe li feet. Said blonde boy was covering his ears from the piercing noise, accompanied by the girl inside. "Damn, lady. Check your voice. Ow." He rubbed his ears when he looked up again and the woman was almost an inch from her face. He looked deep into her brown eyes and could see the low neckline of her dress, making him blush a little at the sight. Just as she was about to say something, the woman grabbed his cheeks and started tugging at them. "Oh. Is it really you? Only a boy has a mustache like that." He continued to tug at his cheeks further as he seemed to ignore the annoyed growl coming from the young man. This continued until Naruto had enough and slapped his hands away with his left. "Itai. Ah. Sorry, Nei-chan. I just reacted." Even though he was causing him a little pain, he still felt guilty for using that thing to hurt innocent people. The bunny rubbed her hands together before staring at the metal arm in fascination. He grabbed it and began to inspect it from fingers to shoulder. "Oh. I remember this thing. It's been so long since you've had it that I've totally forgotten about it." "Hey. What?" The woman appeared to bite her tongue as she leapt off the seat of the carriage and fell to the ground, uttering random words as she tried to string together a complete sentence. "Ah ha ha ha. It doesn't matter. You just remind me of someone I know. Forget I said anything. Oh, look what a time. I have to go." She turned and ran as fast as she could. She yelled over her shoulder. "Perv-kun, take care of the girl for me, okay? Okay. Bye. Before Naruto could even answer, the girl scuttled out of sight as quickly as possible. He stood there on the road as he looked at the carriage and shook his head. It wasn't his problem anymore. He didn't care what was happening. Hi. Oni-chan. Are you still there? Naruto stopped short when he felt a sudden need to help her rise inside at the innocence of her question and her voice. He mumbled to himself before walking back to the front of the carriage and began pushing it with his bare hands. With some magic in his hands and ignoring the pain in his feet, he began pushing the little carriage towards the city they came from. Yes, he answered. I am here. Thank you, Oni-chan. He kept pushing the cart at a very slow pace, not wanting to scare the girl. Huh? Shall we move? Yes. Don't worry, I'm doing it. I'm pushing this thing towards the city. Oh. You're super strong, huh, Oni-chan. Naruto felt some of her pride swell at the girl's compliment as she chuckled to herself. Well, I have my moments, he said with a well-hidden smile on her face. So what are you doing here, huh? Do you usually do the doomed carriage rides yourself? And no. I was with some of the servants my father had assigned to look after me, she said with some embarrassment at being accused of being stupid and dangerous. They said they had to check that I was protected at all times before embarking on my journey. Protected? Why should you be protected? Because some bad men sent a letter to my father saying they would hurt us for doing something bad to them. And I really don't know why. She sounded scared as her voice seemed to crack slightly. But I'm not allowed to go anywhere until everyone has made sure I'm safe. How disgusting, she said without conviction as she continued to push the cart with little interest in the conversation. So why aren't Mom and Dad here with you right now? She waited a few seconds as there seemed to be a silent war on what the girl would say next. My father always has work to do, so I don't get to play with him very often. And my mom, he swallowed because it was hard for him to pronounce the next few words. My mom died last year. Naruto stopped pushing as he stared through the curtain in shock at the pain he was saying. He lowered his head because he felt embarrassed for being so casual in their conversation. I am sorry. It must have been horrible. He heard sobs as the girl hummed in response to his statement. As he continued to insist, he decided to try to help her remember the good things about her beloved. How was she? Hey. How was your mom? She must have been wonderful. The girl let out a few sobs before deciding to obey. She was the kindest, most wonderful woman in the world. She was kind to everyone she met, and she always wanted to make sure the people around her were happy before worrying about herself. The girl began to hear some joy in his voice as she continued to describe the stranger outside to her mother. He never got angry. To me, even if I did something stupid. And she was the most beautiful woman in the whole world. Really, Oni-chan. You wouldn't believe how pretty she was. I bet she was an amazing sorceress as well. She was the best celestial spirit mage of all time. Heavenly spirit. Yes. It's a spell that allows you to summon spirits from another world. It's amazing. Naruto was surprised to find that there was a magic that allows you to summon such living creatures. You can summon people and animals. Oh really? It's so cool. Naruto was really moved by the explanation that the girl was giving him about the magic of her mother. Yes. And I have too. He smiled at the pride and exuberant happiness that flowed from his voice. I have Aquarius the water bearer and Cancer the giant crab. They are super strong. Except, he heard a jolt in the car and a nervous twitch in his voice. Aquarius-san is a bit mean. Naruto chuckled nervously at the girl's state of terror at the obvious hostility her supposed spirit showed him. But they help me a lot, he said with renewed enthusiasm. And I'm learning to use them better every day. And one day I'll be as good as my mother. Naruto felt the girl stop gasping when he thought he couldn't keep saying what he was saying. She was learning the same mother magic as her. Maybe because it was so easy since he'd seen it before. Maybe because they pushed her to do it. But probably because it helped her remember what her mother was like, so that she would never forget. She's not really gone. The girl inside her silently stopped sobbing when she felt the older boy comfort her. If you're learning her magic and want to become more like her, then you'll never forget her. But if you just remember what she did for you and what she was like, then she'll never quite go away. She's your mom. She could never leave you without making sure you can live happily with the life you have. He smiled a little as he entered the city limits thanks to his efforts as he thought about how remembering Kakashi and Kurama helped him adjust to this world when he arrived. Helping him remember that this was the new life they'd been given, whether they knew it or not. This is what Rob Ji-chan told him when he felt sad about his friend's passing. The girl sobbed a little as she wiped away her tears. Did your parents tell you, Oni-chan? No, I have no parents. Hey. Why not? I don't know. I just came into the world. I never cared about who or how. I am sorry. It's fine. I really don't let it bother me. Naruto looked around and saw that the people he once scattered had disappeared and returned home. I had this guardian once. He was the first person I'd ever really met. He took care of me and taught me many things. And, he looked down at her strange arm and felt a tinge of sadness well up in her. And now it's gone. I am sorry. It's okay. He died making sure no one got hurt again. And he made sure I could live the way I wanted. And I still have a part of him with me wherever I go. She smiled again and finished pushing the wagon towards the city. She exhaled and leaned against her side as she looked up at the stars. Oni-chan? You are a wizard? Yes. What are you doing? Well, I was quite interested in this guild called Fairy Tail. And I really wanted it too, but I have to think about it now. Why? Naruto scratched his neck as he crouched against the side of the carriage for support. If I join, I will have to give my friend some bad news. And I'm worried about what will happen to her when I do. Will it hurt? Yes. So you can be there for her, right? Naruto looked at the closed window where the girl's shadow was still sitting. If you want to see your friend and she will be sad when you tell her the news, make sure you are there to help her. Tell him what you told me. And I bet he'll be happy you're there. This is what I think. Naruto contemplated what he had said and was thoughtful. It was probably not that simple to think, and it sure wouldn't have been that easy to say. But if this girl could find a solution, what kind of man would she be if she couldn't? Lucy-sama. Naruto watched down the street as a group of men and women ran towards it, crying as they screamed. They all came before him, panting heavily as they fell to their knees. The first person to notice her gift was a small, middle-aged waitress with a ponytail. She looked at the blonde boy who stood carelessly in front of the carriage of her master's daughter. Who are you? Could it be one of the Ronin? He joked. Why young, the waitress stepped forward, obviously terrified of the blonde boy who was looking at them like they weren't even a threat. And I don't know who you are, but she got into a ridiculous fisting position and raised her fists as if inviting him to a meeting. If you're really going to take Lucy Joe-sama, you'll have to carry her over my dead body. Naruto watched as all the other people were standing in funny poses and sized them all up. Despite not knowing who he was or what he could do, he only thought of the girl's safety above his own. He smiled as he idly knocked on the carriage door. In response, the girl opened the door and jumped down, looking at all her servants, her family who had come for her. Naruto finally saw the girl he had been chatting with for the past few minutes. She was shorter than him, at least by a good few inches. She was blonde with her hair pulled back into a side ponytail and she was wearing a little pink dress. About her, she looked at all the people in front of her. Spec-san. Lucy Joe-sama. Are you okay? That's better. All the people started crowding her and hugging her, grateful that the girl was safe. She scolded her for her reckless actions of hers and shouted that she was still fine. Naruto smiled and decided it was his time to leave the scene happy. He pushed the wagon and started walking in any direction he could. Oni-chan. Naruto turned around and saw a quick blur of blonde on her chest as she wrapped him in the tightest hug her small arms could hold. He looked down to see the girl looking at him with a big warm smile on her face. I know you will make the right decision. I know you will. And when I become a great wizard, he closed his eyes and gave her the biggest smile he could muster. I'll come see you and then we can play our magic. Well? Naruto looked at the girl in shock as he couldn't believe all the boundless trust this little girl had placed in him. Even though they'd only known each other for a few minutes, she trusted him as if she'd known him a lifetime. She returned the hug around her smaller form and smiled. Yes. It's a promise. Lucy dropped the older boy's body and ran to where all of her family's employees were. She nodded to the older boy as she headed wherever she was going. And when the servants asked her who the boy was, she replied with a big smile on her face. He is my guardian angel. Naruto walked aimlessly through the now empty city as his mind drowned in everything he was thinking and the decisions he had to make. The motivation he got from the girl who put her trust in him. The depression he received from the Dark Guild master who despised him. It was getting too hard to decide. Too hard to think. Naruto grabbed his head as he tried to stop all the commotion and voices in his head. Need help. Someone. Help. Damn. Where are those idiots? Naruto looked towards the source of the voice that broke the mess. She was a tall woman with long red hair pulled back in a ponytail and white cat ears sticking out of her head. She wore a skin-tight white cat costume that showcased her figure that could match or even beat the previous bunny. He had one hand on his hip while the other gripped a shriveled old book tightly. If I don't find them soon, we'll get stuck here, and I won't stay here just because of those idiots. The woman turned slightly, showing her left arm. A blue fairy tattoo embedded on her forearm. Naruto looked at her in surprise before steeling himself and running towards her. Hey woman. Hey. And now, the Catwoman turned to see the blonde-haired boy looking at her. With a speed that made light look like a snail dissolving when touched by salt, she knelt and covered her hair and shoulders. With the book in its paws. She was visibly shaking and appeared to be sweating as the boy eyed her suspiciously. "Are you okay?" "Why yes. Why I'm just The woman kept scanning her surroundings as if she was trying to find something that would get her attention. "I was checking the condition of the road pavement." She hit the ground with her hand and took some solid hits. "Yes. Looks good." Naruto looked at the woman as if she were an anomaly as she shook her head because she had something to do. "Anything. Listen, do you know a girl from your guild? Her name is Ezra. Elsa Scarlet." She indeed received a lucid nod from the distracted woman who continued to play with the cement. "Is happy." The Catwoman raised her head, interested in her question that she had asked. "I mean, are you happy with what you have now? Guild people. Your new family. Does he look happy?" Naruto waited apprehensively as the woman seemed to think about her answer. "Yes. She is very happy." Naruto breathed a long sigh of relief as the woman confirmed her thoughts. At least he was right. She was happy and that was all that mattered to her. "Why?" Naruto calmed down and looked at his feet. "He wanted to know if you liked the new guild you joined, and I thought you would know." "Don't you want to see her?" Naruto looked at the woman on their knees with surprise. "That. Don't you want to see how happy you are? You were acting like a stranger, but all you really want to do is see her for yourself, right?" Naruto stood there in silence as he stared at the open back of the woman before him. "Then why don't you want to see her?" He anxiously awaited an answer from the boy behind her. The boy looked down as he tried to think of an answer for the woman. "I did not know what to say." So she said what she was trying to hide. "I'm scared because that girl is the first person who has looked at me as a real human being." She didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't try to lie to himself or to the woman in front of him. He had no more reason to do it. "The first person who really saw my life with value in it. She is my friend. My first friend, and he saved my life so many times that I can't live without knowing he was happy. That he could have everything he wanted would be something I would give my life for. And I know a truth that you deserve to know. But if I tell him, he might see me as a monster. The messenger who tells her the truth that will break her heart. And I don't want to lose her like that." It was a selfish motive, but he couldn't deny it. If she looked at him as a friend, she would make him happy. So if he was risking losing that friend, he didn't want to take that risk. She hated herself for it. But she couldn't fight the fear of seeing the rejection in her eyes when she looked at him. "And I won't be able to control myself." She watched her hands as they lit up in the partly cloudy sky. "I can fight this feeling now. And I can keep trying to push it away for the rest of my life. But if Ezra hurt me, or if I hurt Ezra, I would lose it. I would lose everything my friends sacrificed to get me here today. Even what he gave me." He reached out and gently touched the space under her right eye. "I can't give up what so many people have suffered to give me. I can't risk it. Not even if it made me happy. So knowing she's happy. That's enough for me." The two stood there in mutual silence. Naruto watched the woman as she continued to kneel in the opposite direction. He seemed to lower his head and let out a deep breath. "So it's always been so deeply ingrained. It's bad." He got up and wiped his knees. "Close your eyes." "Hey. I said close your eyes now." Naruto acted carefully before obeying and covering his eyes with his hands. Instantly, he felt an immensely fast, heavy, somewhat soft but hard punch hit the back of his head. He groaned and covered the area where he was hit with his hands. "Cover your eyes." He brought them back to his face when he was alarmed by the ferocity in her voice. Since all he could see was darkness, he felt the woman's paw-covered hands grab his shirt and pull him towards his face. "What's wrong with you? How can you think he'd be happy if he knew you were suffering like this? You don't care about your happiness? Well? Is that all you have to say? You don't even know what you want. How can you think what that girl wants?" The boy stammered as he tried to think of a defense against the crime of the old woman. "Let me tell you what I know about that girl. Even though she is happy with the new life she has found, she can't help but regret leaving her old family. She imagines what she could have done to help them. Trying to stop crying every night because she was alone again and couldn't protect the people she promised to be with. That's what I was going through. And then she discovered that there was a possibility that one of her friends that she thought she'd lost forever was still alive. And he felt a new ray of hope appear. He prayed for his salvation. In order for them to be free and see this new world for themselves, she prayed that they would be safe. This is what she did. So now, one of his friends is finally here and she's thinking that he should leave without even telling him it's okay. Do you think that's a good idea?" "And no ma'am. Damn no. Even if this news is bad, even if this news would devastate her, do you think she has no right to know? If you think it will hurt her, be there for her. Be and help her through it." "Yes, madam. What about this feeling that you're going to hurt people? This past you're running from?" The woman lowered her voice and the boy arched his feet again as the boy was surprised by the sudden loss of hostility. It's natural to be afraid of hurting people. As you start getting stronger, you always have to worry about whether this new strength will help or hurt the people you meet. But the difference is if you face that fear and use that power to make you strong. Or run away from him and kill anyone who gets in your way. Don't let it control you. Never miss with it. Not only will you hurt yourself if you lose, the people who care about you, your friends and family will be heartbroken to see you suffer like this. Naruto felt the woman let go of her shirt and he could feel her at her eye level, somehow feeling the warmth and security that her presence radiated strengthened his resolve. So now you have to choose. Run away or face it. No one will think less than you for your choice. If you want to see that girl, go a mile west of the guild and you will find a building where she is. If you want her to stay the way she is, then you can leave town and build a life you're proud of. But Naruto felt the sides of his face being supported by the hairy fur of the woman's paw-covered hands. Then he felt a soft, warm sensation settle on her forehead. A kiss of good luck from the woman in the catsuit as she tried to reassert her courage and commitment. I know you will make the right decision. Always make the right choice. It's you, after all. Naruto felt a strange warmth rise in his chest as the grip around his face loosened. After a moment Naruto dropped his hands and saw that the woman was gone. He stood there silent before slowly touching the spot the woman had kissed on her forehead. A small tinge of pink grew on her features. She lowered her hands as she stood there as the night breeze brought the clouds closer to the moon. Naruto looked in the direction of the guild he had been watching for some time, and he felt a strong fire burn in his eyes, as he strengthened his will and his choice. Elsa sat on the bed while she read the novel Levi had lent her so she would have something to do when she couldn't sleep. She looked at the small clock on the bedside table and saw that it was long after midnight and she was still awake. She couldn't sleep. He just didn't feel like it. And it wasn't the fault of the love book I was reading, just general confusion and love, you perverts. He just wasn't sleepy right now. And more often than not, she would have another one of those dreams. Of the two people who felt so natural but never knew their faces. All the hustle and bustle that had gone on that day should have tired her out, but she didn't. Fighting Natsu and Gray. Beat Natsu and Gray. Threatening that bitch Mirajane. Searching all over town for those idiotic kids. And getting a lesson from that cat lady was also taking its toll. Ezra placed her book on the table and opened the window curtains. He looked up at the dazzling moon that was floating like a beautiful jewel resting in a dark lake. She sat there mesmerized by the sight of her as the shape of the rock lit up her eyes. He remembered the only other time he had seen the moon as clearly as the passage of his life. The breaking of his past and the beginning of his future. Clouds blocked the moonlight as she sighed and looked at the ground below her. Her eyes widened as she saw a figure standing outside her bedroom, masked by the shadow of the clouds. She couldn't recognize the shape or person outside as they were just looking at the bedroom with no action. Pervert? Abuser? Was he about to barge into the bedroom? He was about to alarm the entire dorm when he ran out to. No, she didn't have to. Hilda Obachan would take care of it herself. And now he had to take responsibility for everyone's safety. It was his job to do it. Shish ran down the stairs not to alarm everyone when a light covered his body. Up and down the stairs, she'd shed her pajamas and put on her normal battle armor, her long red hair still flowing behind her. Ezra ran out and ran around the building, seeing the man standing on the cliff even in the blinding darkness. Ezra wasted no time as he drafted a sword to his hands and rushed to the figure. The shadow of her saw her come to him while she seemed to use her hand to deviate the sword. Ezra was surprised by the powerful counterattack before recovering her position and slashing her sword against the man's arm. They traded blows several times before pushing each other and keeping a wide distance. What are you doing here? I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just came to see someone. I don't care. Intruders like you are not allowed in this place. I'm sworn to keep everyone here safe, so leave now. Listen, Miss Picky, I just need to come in for a minute. No exceptions. The clouds began to stir as the light returned to the surrounding cliffs. I have to stop people like you, otherwise, we would. And just like that, their hostility was gone. Moonlight illuminated the once black area and they stared at each other, completely frozen in shock. She had gotten taller. She no longer wore the rags and bound cloth of her confined cell days. She now wore armor around her small chest, accompanied by a low-waisted white skirt and brown boots. She had grown her hair much longer and the scarlet follicles now reached down to her lower back. And something had changed in her face. I just couldn't point a finger at it. He had grown up. His once childish face had become a little thinner and he seemed to have seen a lot in his past. Her eyes still held her gift to him and the mustache she had come to know after so many years together. His clothes were nothing compared to what appeared to have been bought or sold for a lot of money, just an inheritance he had received from some. His feet were slightly bruised and bare. His arm had bandages over his shoulder, But there seemed to be a strange change in his left arm. It shone in the moonlight. They looked at each other as if they couldn't believe what was happening. As if it had been a dream or an illusion they had suddenly been catapulted into. But they didn't know about the attention. Just look in front of them. Naruto? A pool of tears formed in his left eye. Ezra? His eyes widened in shock. Naruto, her tears fell as she flashed a trembling smile. Her voice seemed to break as a soft laugh escaped her lips. He dropped his sword and took a step forward. He followed his movement. They made several awkward, jerky movements before running into each other. They both smiled as they got closer and closer. She raised her hand. She dropped it on her cheek. Shoot him down. He jumped on him. He grabbed her neck. You're real. Where were you? I have been worried for a year whether you were still alive. Parker-san told me you were alive but I didn't believe him. And now you are here bullying girls. Naruto stood there stunned as the girl seemed to yell at her. Hit him on the cheek without warning and scold him for his actions. Yes, it was definitely Ezra. She would do this to him and Cheel whenever they started arguing for no reason. In fact, if they counted how many times he hit them after their fights, he got the championship. He smiled as she yelled at her before hearing her silence. Then he felt a small drop of water fall on his right cheek as he opened his eyes to look at her. Her shoulders trembled as she sobbed, her tears streaming down the left side of her face. Sniffs I thought you were gone. She was crying hard when Naruto looked at her in concern. I thought you were dead. And I didn't even get to see you. She wiped the tears from her eyes as she tried to pluck up her courage but failed. Elsa stopped when she felt the boy's arms wrap around her and hold her as tightly as she could. Her eyes widened in surprise as he stroked her as best he could, savoring the sensation after all this time. I missed you. I missed you so much. And a tear trickled down each of her eyes as she smiled as hard as she could into his embrace. I'm so glad you're okay. Elsa's eyes softened and she slid her arms under hers and hugged him. They hugged as best they could as they regained the feeling of warmth and calm they had when they cheered each other up in the tower when they were too scared. Elsa let some of her sobs fade and Naruto let the tears fall as they both lay silent in their embrace. After what could have been hours, they all kicked back and had a good laugh. Both wiping tears from their eyes as they both laughed in each other's faces. You let your hair grow out. She ran her hands through her long red hair as she giggled at her interest in him. I think it's great. Thank you. She looked at his bandaged arm and grabbed it, watching the boy as he tried to find the cause of the injuries. You hurt yourself, right? Yes. You argued. Yes. Elsa shook her head in disappointment as she stroked her face. She looked at him again. Juan? It would be safer to say I got a draw. If hitting a human monster with so much power that it boils down to blowing you and itself up for a breath, then yes. Drawing. Naruto chuckled softly as the girl was about to scold him for his reckless actions. Naruto then noticed the change in his facial features and grabbed him in his hands. What happened to your eye? He was staring in shock at his new blue right eye as he remembered that the last time he saw her, she had given it the function of survival. Naruto held her face so close that a tiny tinge of pink had built up on her face. Master said he ruined my face by missing my eye like that, so, she grabbed his hands and lowered them, entwining them in hers. Poor Lyuzuka-san gave me a replacement, he said nervously as he looked down, avoiding his surprised face. But why is it blue? If it's blue, then it will look. Naruto trailed off as he let the statement hang in the air and touched the space around his eye. I chose him this way because, she looked at him and gave him a gentle smile that showed how glad she was that he was back. I wanted to have something that reminded me of you. So I will never forget. Naruto felt a blush on his face at his sincere words from him, as he couldn't meet his eyes. Suddenly, he gripped the elephant tightly on the cliff and waved his arm in front of his eyes. What is this? She lifted up the short sleeve of his shirt and saw the strange shape of metal around its ragged, jagged cavity. Why is it around your arm? What happened? Naruto laughed and scratched his head. Where do I start? Rob Ojisan taught you all this? Actually? Yes. Naruto chuckled as he balanced himself on the edge of the river that cascaded down the middle of the road. Walking beside him was his oldest friend as they talked about everything they had done in the last year and a half. Nothing has been saved. And even after 3 hours of wandering around the city and talking about what they'd done, they were still excited to tell each other the smallest detail. We should go see him in the mountains. We can even stop by Pegasus if you want. Fair warning. They're rare. He survives. Ezra smiled but showed only a fraction of her relief and her happiness knowing the old man was still alive. Alright. I'm a little mad you didn't come to see me. She pouted in the opposite direction as they continued their little stroll. So fairy tale. All those things you told me sound great. She turned and began to walk backwards up the stone groove. These guys Natsu and Gray look like fun. Urza shook her head with a smile because she knew she would connect with the children. And this girl Mira-Jane? Are you sure she's a broke prostitute our age? Yeah. The biggest bitch in the whole damn city. Make sure you don't get in touch with her. Otherwise you will get sick. Got it? Naruto doubled over under the strength and anger that surged through the girl's voice. She straightened and lost her angry tone. So, does it hurt? No. I'm used to it. He leapt to his feet and delivered a flurry of quick, powerful blows with his left hand. Actually, it's great once you get the hang of it. If you say so. They walked alone through the deserted city while all the other residents slept in their houses. He realized they had almost circled the big city, because they were lost in conversation. Your adventures. Your experiences. Elsa told him Parker-san was still fine. Rob Ji-chan's home and the training he gave. However, they didn't talk about the tower. They could only say that they hadn't received a word from their friends. Hello Urza? What kind of magic do you use? They reached the park on the outskirts of town when they decided to take a break from their walk to the tree. Must be something cool, right? Well, I really don't know. I'd say my magic is at least average. But if you insist. Urza walked towards the center of the park, in front of her old friend. She stood there for several moments before her whole body was covered in a bright light. Naruto gaped at her before her armor and clothing completely disappeared from her body, leaving her naked for just a moment. Her body was then covered in new armor which changed her appearance. A pair of wings was attached to a black cuirass and large shoulder pads with jet black gauntlets. She stood proudly as she showed off her new armor to his old friend. I can equip my armor with any other pair I have in my slot. And this is my black wing armor. What do you think, Naruto? Naruto's face was frozen in on itself. Urza blinked because she didn't expect that to be the statement she'd asked for. Well, I have to change into this armor. And it's so much easier than taking my clothes off in battle. She smiled and looked at him excitedly. Want to see another pair? And no. And okay. I trust your word. Elsa shrugged and pulled on her basic armor, forcing Naruto to look away from her to maintain a false sense of dignity for the girl. When she returned to her normal overalls and white skirt, she looked at Naruto with a smile. So what magic did you learn? Naruto let go of any form of his previous wariness as he smiled at the girl. Watch this. He picked up a small stone he was holding in his hand and covered it with his magic. He threw it before moving his wrist and pointing the stone at the girl. He raised an eyebrow as he watched the rock sail towards her. Idly he raised his hand and pushed the stone out of its way. He looked back and was surprised to see another sail of rock in the path of the last one. Leaning to the side, he watched the rock bounce off the ground. She stood there before shimmering and dispersing into fairy dust, much to the surprise of the young fairy tale wizard. That's how my copy works. I use my magic to cover what I want. So my magic makes a permanent impression of its form and I can remake it whenever I want. Then he reached out and another rock reappeared in his hand. He smiled big as Urza was impressed with this new form of magical ability. But that is not all. Naruto then stopped in front of the huge tree in the middle of the park and covered his body in a different style than before. Urza watched as he released a good amount of his magical power before it started to compress and transform into a visible light. A wall moved up her arm to her right fist as it formed a brilliant ball of light around him. He stood up proudly, smiling, and punched the tree. The ball of light slipped from his hand and flew towards the bark of the tree. It hit the tree and caused some splinters to break off the huge, strong wood. Urza was surprised by the demonstration of his other power and applauded his effort. Naruto stood there before deflated and lowered his head. I really wanted you to do more damage. He regained his cheerful demeanor and looked at Urza. And this is the knight's armor. I can amplify my power and abilities with a magical cloak. That's great. Naruto started playing with the magic weapon ability with his hands. Rob Ji-chan tells me that it makes me 2 to 3 times stronger with a full cloak. But if I focus on one part, sending some magic to his forearm, I can make my attacks 4 to 6 times stronger. Urza looked at him in amazement as she had no idea that she had evaluated such innovative forms of magic. So simple yet surprisingly complex. And, a familiar light flashed in his hand before 2 bat-like weapons appeared in his hands. I also know requip. Just a few weapons I copied but still. Naruto, that's great. Naruto chuckled as he scratched the back of his neck in pride and embarrassment at being praised by the armored girl. I had no idea that Rob Ojisan knows all these magic styles. I should go and ask him to train me too. Urza considered the idea before looking at Naruto to see her point of view, and then she saw something. Naruto's eyes looked frozen, as if he had just realized some horrible news. He lowered his head as if he were feeling fear and shame and every emotion in between. She saw the exuberant happiness he was emitting fall and be surrounded by something else. Naruto. Naruto, how are you? I. He struggled with himself as he tried to find the right words to say to the girl. He lowered his head and his mouth moved but no sound came out. He closed her mouth and bit as hard as he could, regretting what he was thinking of saying. But then his melancholy seemed to subside and was replaced by shame and sadness. I didn't learn from Ji-chan. I learned from other people. The of him. Their names were Kazuya and Erika. Actually. Yes. They were very strong. And they were great too. And they took great care of each other. And they loved each other. And Elsa realized that his words were in the past tense. As if they were no longer with them. She reached out her hand and tried to comfort him. Naruto. It's okay. You must not. And they were gone. Naruto lifted his head and looked at her with pained eyes. They had been gone for so long when I found them in the tower. Erza watched him as she tried to reinforce her words and say something to him. Something he had to say now. They left before they could say goodbye. Naruto. What are you talking about? Naruto summoned a pair of strangely wrapped bloody bundles that rested in his arms as he grabbed them for support. These belonged to them. He pulled back a corner of the casing, revealing the immaculate hilt and fine metalwork of the two swords. The Excalibur and Kusanagi swords. These were their most prized possessions. And they wanted their family to keep him with them. Their daughter. He looked at her as she looked at him with hope and disbelief. Their daughter Erza. Erza stared at him as she reached out and placed the elegant swords in her hands. She grabbed the blades and looked at them with trembling hands, gathering all his words. What are you saying? Erika Soko and Kazuya Sukumina. I found them in the catacombs of the Tower of Heaven. They clung to these as their last stolen cult possessions. In them, he conjured up a small, worn brown leather book in his hand. I found this book. This told me about them and their magic. And their daughter. You Erza. Erza looked scared as she fully realized it. It was your parents. And they were killed for trying to destroy the tower and take everyone out. He watched as a wave of pain hit him at having to tell her. I'm sorry, Elsa. Very sorry. Elsa stared blankly at the swords as her shoulders shook and her left eye watered. Did they leave? They're gone already? Even though she didn't know them, it hurt her like never before. An overwhelming pain and her sadness gripped her heart as she wrapped the swords in her arms. Being her only lifeline for the family she never got to meet. Erza, too, wanted to meet them. A tear fell from her eyes and fell on their swords. I wanted to meet them and ask them why we weren't together. Maybe there was a reason why they kidnapped me. Or maybe they forgot me or left me to save themselves. It hurt to think like that. And I haven't forgotten the idea that they could be. She squeezed them even tighter. Tears flowed from her eyes like a stream. Naruto just watched as he felt his heart sink and break. Watch her feel this pain. I won't even be able to ask them if they really loved me. Sick. Of course they did. Naruto grabbed her shoulders and looked at her with renewed ardor, even as a few tears blurred his eyes. I read it, Erza. I read what they thought and what they did. What they lived and what they felt being with you. They love you. They love you more than anything in the world. You were their fresh start to happiness. You were the end of past pain. You were the light that helped them see that they could do great things in the dark world. And you were their last thought. All they ever wanted was for you to be happy. All they wanted was for you to be free. Only then could you have a life that you could enjoy. Elsa looked at him in shock, tears still welling in her eyes. Whatever you do, whatever you did, they were happy. They were proud of you. He held her as tightly as he could as she tried to convey his feelings through her touch. They wanted you to live a life you could be proud of, and where you could be proud of them, so don't doubt yourself. Erza, they loved you. May they love their daughter more. Erza's eyes widened as her proclamation echoed in the crisp morning air. Her eyes grew heavy as they began to water again as she leaned further into his embrace. The same warmth she felt about her when her family supported her in the tower. When she was terrified and couldn't make it through the next day. It was like the warmth she had experienced in her dreams. The warmth of their parents' love. She dropped her swords and clung to Naruto, weeping on his shoulder as he let out all of her regret and his pain. She screamed into the night because it was just her and her friend, complaining that she couldn't see her parents. But her moving into the future where she lived her life the way they wanted, as she wanted. Makarov Drayar yawned into his withered hand as he crumpled towards the guild on his stubby little legs. He had stayed up late last night taking care of Natsu. After finding a strange old book on the riverbank, he found the young pink dragon slayer running around the outskirts of the city. Shout something about demons while holding a wound on your neck. When the holy magician tried to ask how he got the scar, The boy panicked and fell into the fetal position. It took at least 2 hours to calm the boy down and bring him home. And after finally putting him to sleep, Makarov only got a few hours of sleep. And man, was I tired. So now all he could do was open the guild early and try to nap while he could. As the little man rounded the guild corner, he was greeted by an unusual sight. Standing in front of the guild gates was the armored resident girl, looking at them with a slight smile. And he could make out a second figure standing beside him, obscured by the girl's position but able to see a strand of blonde hair. Hey, Ezra. The girl looked to her side to see her master with his cane in hand and a nonchalant expression on her awkward face. He ran to meet him. He looked up and was surprised by what he saw. What happened? Her left eye was red, sore from crying for perhaps hours, but even then she had a smirk on her face as he looked at his former mentor. Oh. It was nothing, master. I just had some time to reflect. She sniffed his nose one last time before wiping his eye to remove the residual water. Master. I would like you to meet my friend. She turned and showed the person who was standing next to him. A boy with blonde hair and a mustache. With 2 eyes of different colors and a prosthetic. The same guy who had been babysitting for the past month. Oddly, his eyes were also red from crying. The boy smiled as he walked towards the little man. So this is Maki, huh? Rob G. Chan was right. He is short. The old man got angry and blew some steam from his ears. What did that guy say about me? Naruto and Ezra laughed as the old master played the field with his comedy routine. He could see by their expressions that there hadn't been any warmth or malice between them. No child bore a grudge against her or him, and he seemed happy just standing next to her. He regained his composure and coughed into his hand. So young. What can I do for you? Naruto sat on the bar stool with Ezra to his right and Makarov sitting across from him. He had explained to the old man everything he thought he needed to know. Rob's current status, its true origin, her past with Ezra. And why was he here? And after the last hour of conversation, Makarov smiled at the boy with some pride. Well, you are something else, aren't you, my son? Made of tough stuff for someone your age. No wonder you're friends with Ezra, huh? Ah ha ha. He patted his back as the boy laughed and the girl sighed. Well, Naruto, if you really want to join my guild, I'd be honored if you did. Naruto looked at him with the widest, happiest light in his eyes that he could muster from not sleeping all night. Really, Gigi? Truly, the old man bent over the counter and pulled a seal from under the countertop. Every family of his is our family, and we would love to have you here with us. What do you say? Naruto smiled and nodded like a madman. Very well. Now everything I have to do is give you your tattoo and your entrance. That's all? Oh. I thought there was some great unfathomable initiation you have to go through to join? It used to be. But one of our oldies broke into town doing it, so now we slap you and boom. Instant member. Now where do you want it? Huh. I choose it? Yes. You can choose any part of your body and we will print you there. Naruto thought about it and was quite intrigued by the possibilities. Has anyone ever kicked his ass? Elsa slapped his head as Makarov just laughed at her question. Ouch. I was just asking. He stroked the sore spot on her head as she looked at the girl who was pouting as he looked in the opposite direction. Then he looked at his arm and saw a tattoo of a dark blue fairy on his left bicep. Naruto looked to his right and smiled. Hee hee. The old man stopped laughing when he saw the boy pointing to the spot on his right arm. Makarov looked between where the boy pointed and where the girl next to him had made hers. The old man glared at him and chuckled like a perverted old man as he looked at the younger boy. My. Make a proclamation at your age? Are we not bold? And it's not like that. What are you talking about? Nothing. Naruto stared at the old man as he bumped his knee and laughed. Then he got up and walked over to the boy's arm. He pressed the seal against his bicep and pushed down, a small light shining from below as he did so. When he did, a tattoo of a black fairy was embedded on her right bicep. Naruto's jaw dropped at the sight as he couldn't express his incomparable glee. Erza smiled happily while Makarov gave the boy a green smile. Naruto smiled as he continued to admire the new addition to his arm. Looking at it from different angles. Elsa smiled and rose from her place on the stool. Come on, Naruto. I'll show you the guild first. Sup, bitch. Elsa was kicked in the back of the head as she was sent over the bar to the bottles of booze on the bar. Naruto looked in shock at what had just happened to his best friend as he turned and looked at the culprit. The girl in question was about her age, maybe a few months younger. She was wearing a strange gothic style that didn't leave much to the imagination. She had beautiful silky white hair and bright blue eyes. The girl had some polish on her fingers and a mischievous smile on her face. That's for not accepting my challenge from yesterday, bitch. N-Chan. What did you do? Listen. I told you not to argue with Elsa. What? She started it. She stuck her finger in her ear as she smiled and laughed. Then she noticed the looks of a new person at the bar who was looking at her like she was a different force of nature. She looked at him before moving closer to him and bringing her face close to his, looking him straight into his eyes. Who are you? I'm Naruto. I'm new. He pointed to the new tattoo on his arm. Mira Jane leaned even further as she surveyed his entire body from his seat. He had the same kind of eyes as that damned Urza. And he had something weird on his arm. But that mustache on his face was really cute. And it wasn't so bad to look at. When a small blush appeared on Naruto's face at her proximity, he leaned back and crossed his arms, nodding. Okay. You look stupid but you have a pretty face. You can be part of a harem when it grows. What? Look. The white-haired girl spun around and was punched in the face, sending her flying towards the table of several more arriving guild mates. Urza landed on her feet, her eyes darkening as she gasped from a torrent of blood. I'll get you for this. She lunged forward and attacked the girl on the ground. Urza is fighting Mira again. Same old man. Same old thing, huh? I want to participate. No Natsu. Bad. Bad. Makarov felt a bead of sweat trickle down his neck as he watched his guild descend upon another wave of destruction. And it wasn't even 10 a.m. When everyone started arguing, he looked at his new family member, hoping he'd be scared off by the inconsiderate attitude they were showing him. Instead, he saw Naruto looking around the bar with wondering eyes. He watched as they all punched each other. They cursed and insulted each other. But he felt no malice in his words or actions. Even Urza and Marijan's fight didn't really hate or harm each other. A smile grew on Naruto's face as he watched the entire bar turn into a battle royale. Makarov smiled and nudged the boy's shoulder. What do you think? He waited a moment to hear the boy's response. Before turning away with a broad grin, showing all his teeth because he couldn't control his happiness. I am home. To be continued.
That's it for this podcast. Thanks for listening to this video. If you did enjoy this part of the story, like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more crossover fictions. And thank you all for your help and support, and have a great day.